if a gubernatorial candidate had been Democrat, attacked on stage by someone with a weapon, and if someone had shown up outside Sonia Sotomayor's house with an intent to kill her, or an intent to kill Elena Kagan, or certainly Ketanji Brown Jackson, how would the media be handling these two incidents? And I think all of you know exactly where I'm going. They would be saying, this is what white supremacy causes. These are what right-wing extremists lead to. They would tie it all into January 6th.
First, I mean, the big news from yesterday was that Lee Zeldin, who we had recently on the show, was attacked on stage by a belligerent drunk who had a blade in his hands. It's kind of a strange-looking edged weapon, but he had a blade in his hand, and he grabbed Lee Zeldin. It's all on video. I'm sure many of you have seen it. In fact, we'll put the video up so people can see for reference at clayandbuck.com. Just in case you haven't seen it, so you can understand what went on here. This guy walks up to him, tries to take the mic out of his hand, then grabs his arm, and then, he's got a blade in his hand, but he kind of falls down after he gets tackled by a bunch of people. Now, it's clearly assault. It's felony assault of a gubernatorial candidate in the state of New York. People are saying it's an attempted assassination. I don't think he's going to this guy's not going to get charged with attempted murder for this, but it is assault. It is assault probably with a deadly weapon. It is felony assault. And that means that this should be, it's a very serious event, and I think should be treated with extreme seriousness by the courts. Clay, he was out on bail. Lee Zeldin was giving a talk at the time about bail reform in New York State. His attacker was out on bail in less than 2 hours.
Well, it's a perfect distillation of the argument that he's trying to make of why violent crime is skyrocketing in the state of New York and why so many people out there are listening to us right now who may in past years have said, man, I would never listen to guys who are going to vote Republican in the 2022 2022 midterms and 2024 presidential election because Democrats have lost their mind. And in particular, Buck, when I saw this news break last night about Lee Zeldin, I thought about the Brett Kavanaugh attempted assassination. And however you want to classify this, to your point, assault with a deadly weapon, assassination attempt, however you want to classify it. In the space of, 6 weeks, we have had an attempted assassination of a sitting Supreme Court justice by a left-wing lunatic who wanted to kill Kavanaugh because of his politics. And we don't know exactly what the motivations, to my knowledge, are of this crazy left-wing loon who attacked Lee Zeldin. But I just want everyone out there to think for a moment. If a gubernatorial candidate had been Democrat, attacked on stage by someone with a weapon, and if someone had shown up outside Sonia Sotomayor's house with an intent to kill her, or an intent to kill Elena Kagan, or certainly Ketanji Brown Jackson, how would the media be handling these two incidents? And I think all of you know exactly where I'm going. They would be saying, this is what white supremacy causes. These are what right-wing extremists lead to. They would tie it all into January 6th. I just want to point out that, to my knowledge, Buck, maybe I've missed it, I haven't seen CNN connecting these stories. I haven't seen MSNBC connecting these stories. And I haven't seen any demand from left-wing media at the Washington Post, the New York Times, that we have to talk about left-wing political violence and how dangerous it is and how much of an existential threat it is to our democracy. And this ties in also, Buck, with what we just saw happen in Maryland. How much discussion are you seeing of Democrats? We saw it happen in Illinois. Democrats all over the country are spending tens of millions of dollars to try to select their opponents in all of these primaries. I haven't seen Republicans really doing this. Isn't that a direct attack on democracy, trying to pick who your opponent is and spending tens of millions of dollars to try to rig elections? Oh, but January 6th is the greatest threat that's ever existed in human history. I just think the timing on all this and the crickets from many parts of our media are illustrative of a bigger picture here.
I also think that the bail reform, and remember, it's not just New York. Other places have done no cash
Most
bail.
big cities in America now.
This was a central component of, and you have to think of this as these multiple pieces of the soft on crime left-wing agenda, which we've seen talked about really for the last, I'd say, 10 years. But in the last 3 years in particular, they got their way all across the board, right? Because of BLM, all of a sudden, all of the, oh, wait, this doesn't work for crime reduction. This doesn't work if you want to have an orderly city or just an orderly society. People said, oh, I don't want to be called racist, so I'll do whatever the defund the police, end mass incarceration movement demands. A big part of it was always this bail reform, and they sold it to everybody as they'll find a story of somebody who, oh man, there's this guy, and he just stole something, but it's because he has a particular circumstance. He had a health issue. They'll find the most sympathetic story possible and say, and he just doesn't have the $5,000 of bail. Now, other people, bail bondsmen, put up the bail, whatever. The story was poor people sit in prison forever and never get out for minor things. That was the narrative, in whatever way they tried to push that on people. The truth is that lunatics with a knife in their hands jump up on stage, attack a Republican governor, and they're out in a couple of hours. That's what bail reform has actually meant. Just like defund the police was supposed to be, Clay, we just need more social workers and more community investment. It was, okay, well, now you have less cops, less OT, less units that are highly trained that can deal with the violent criminal element, and more people are being robbed, attacked, and dying in the streets of America's cities. The cause and effect here is clear.
I think we have audio from Lee Zeldin, and just so you know out there, we have invited Lee Zeldin on the program today. I'm sure that today is total chaos for him, but he may call in, he may not, and certainly if Lee Zeldin's people are listening right now, we'd love for him to reach out to our audience and tell the story. But I believe we have audio. He's spoken about exactly what happened during this attack as he was speaking in upstate New York. Let's listen to
the
this.
way that I'm wired, when I see somebody wearing a hat that says that they're a veteran, my guard couldn't possibly be more dropped. But at the same exact time, I noticed he had a weapon in his hand. And it had two holes where he had two fingers through the holes. It had two sharp dagger-like edges on it. And he was telling me, "You're done." And obviously, in that point, regardless of whatever's on your hat, this was not a normal situation, and there needed to be action taken. When he lifted up his hand and he was lunging for my throat area, the first thought was to grab onto his wrist and just to hold it, because there were so many people around that I would expect there to be help quickly.
I mean, this is terrifying, right? And thankfully, he was able to hold off that hand, that potential attack, that attack with the weapon. And Buck, I feel like with the rise of violence overall that's going on in the country, I hate to say it, but if I'm a politician on the road campaigning in the midterms this fall, I want a level of security around me that I have never had before, even if you aren't a person who feels particularly in danger. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, the ratcheting up, Joe Biden was supposed to make America normal again, but the ratcheting up of violence and the acceptable nature that the left wing has now put in play, I would be very nervous if I'm on the campaign trail.
There's a desperation from the Democrat left right now. They have no good arguments. They know they're about to get they're not just about to lose an election.
Yes.
They're about to be told by strong majorities of the American people ideas that leftists hold very close to their sense of how virtuous they are, how good they are, how smart they are. Those ideas are about to be dumped all over by the American people coming into in this midterm election. And so I think that there's the left, because of the rhetoric and COVID and the lockdowns and all of this, is more unhinged than we have seen them. I think than we've ever seen them on, and at least in my lifetime. I can't speak. I think the left has gone crazier on more things, and they don't have arguments. And so you hear even the mainstream rhetoric from Democrats. I mean, you even hear from the Hochul campaign, there was a lot of kind of, get out there and you tell Lee Zeldin that, his wanting to get rid of common sense gun laws because he doesn't care about children dying from gun violence. I mean, you hear the stuff that they say and you go, well, a person who really believes that is going to feel like they have some greater justification for confronting physically politicians, and perhaps even for some of the most unhinged leftists, incidents like this, and God forbid incidents that are even worse. What we saw with James Hodgkinson at the baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia in 2018.
Yes.
Bernie Sanders supporter. By the way, how long do you think it'll take? And not that I blame Bernie Sanders for that, but I just think if we're going to talk about political violence, we have to be honest about the fact that there are violent leftists, obviously. And beyond that, Clay, when do we actually get to have a conversation about the fact that the last election was held under a degree of duress? That there were stores boarding up all over America because they were terrified of what was going to happen if Joe Biden didn't win.
Yes. The violence of the left is very minimally talked about. The easy analogy is we just had another January 6th hearing, and to my knowledge, nobody has ever figured out or even had a legitimate hearing into how do we have a whole summer of violence in 2020? Who facilitated? Who paid for it? And how do we know it's not going to happen again as soon as Democrats have another election that they're trying to win?